Trenton 365 with Jacque Howard. Profiling the businesses, organizations, and people that make Trenton better.
Welcome and good evening. This is your host, Lisa Austin Granville, and you're listening to WIMG 1300 AM, great gospel right here in Trenton, New Jersey. But you're tuned in tonight. This is a special one to Trenton 365. And guess what? I'm interviewing Mr. Trenton 365. So welcome, Mr. Jacque Howard. I guess really no welcome is needed, but.
Well, this is awesome. And, it's great that, just before we signed on, we were talking like, I'm kind of getting used to this on the other side, and I think you do a fantastic job. So maybe you can be my second host.
Oh, thank you. Anytime. But, it's really a privilege, and I'm telling you, honor. I think what you do, and you do it with such excellence. And we have a lot to talk about today. Mm-hmm. Really, really excited. I want you to tell those who may be obviously not new to your show, because obviously you have two shows. Mm-hmm. I read all about you. Right. And you are actually, not just nation. People are listening to you around the world. They have access to what the information that you're providing. Mm-hmm. And that's really awesome. But for those who are just tuned in, mm-hmm. tell them a little bit about Jacque Howard and Trenton 365,
Sure.
how it all came about.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Trenton. Well, I was born in Trenton, raised in Ewing Township with the public schools. I went to college in Philadelphia at the Art Institute of Philadelphia, got a degree in fashion. I worked in the garment industry for many years. I took a package, stopped working in the garment industry, and then started working in finance with Merrill Lynch. I was part of the team when Merrill Lynch was acquired by Bank of America. And then from there, I had some health issues and said, the lifestyle, the money, all those things are great, but it doesn't make any sense, if you're not spending time with your family. And I had a young daughter at the time. Shout out to Maddie. She's 14 now. My wife,
Maddie.
Vanessa.
Wonderful.
Of 17 years.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And so what I said is, what am I doing? So I restarted focusing my attention. Started spending a lot more time in the faith community where I was worshiping at Westminster Presbyterian Church. Shout out to Pastor Karen Hernandez-Granzon. And from there, I joined a couple of boards, trying to give back some energy as well as like some talents that I had, and served on several nonprofit boards in Trenton, the Isles Organization, Artworks, I Am Trenton, and some others. And really fell back in love with the city where I was born. And falling in love with the city, you fall in love with the people. And I've spent a lot of time with some amazing people, and I do on a regular basis. And I started to think about, all these wonderful things that are happening in this city where George Washington became George Washington. Wow. Where our country was really built right. on the streets of Trenton. And I said, it would be pretty awesome if I could get some of my friends together and see what we could do as far as creating a critical mass to start changing some dynamics here in the city. The original idea was Trenton 350, because I figured, if I had 349 people myself, right. we'd be able to do some amazing stuff. And I was right. thinking, what about if we had 350 people that would support an event? Right. What would that do to those events? So anyway, after talking to Scott Miller of X7A, who was helping me with some production stuff at the time, he said, why don't you change it to 365? It's all year, kind of rolls off the tongue better. And so I did that. And WIMG was the first station to have my program. And so I'm always bestowed some great energy to WIMG and the family here.
Yes.
And so I've just been doing that. And I hyper-focus under the acronym of R.E.A.C.H, R-E.A.C.H, Recreation, Environment, Art and Culture, Civic Engagement, Health and Nutrition. And my impetus is I just want to build a better community for everybody.
And you're touching. See, this is. I want you to slow down and say your acronym again, because when
Sure.
I read it, I mean, it just touches every area, especially in the urban community. Mm-hmm. So go ahead, say that again.
Yeah, the acronym is R.E.A.C.H, R-E-A.C.H, Recreation, Environment, Art and Culture, Civic Engagement, Health and Nutrition.
Because I want to talk about all of them tonight.
Okay, that's
Seriously,
cool.
Because, I think it's extremely important. But, I really want to do a lot of focusing on civic engagement tonight. Mm-hmm. I think it's so necessary because of where we're at and the climate that we're living in, especially here in the city of Trenton. We just had some elections, and I saw you out. I'm going to shout you out right now because I was out there looking on Facebook because I know you were doing a lot of live feeds, and I was really excited to be able to be tuned in. I wasn't actually able to get there, but just to have you live and to share that with the community, I thought that was very awesome. So thank you.
Oh, man, I really appreciate that. And I also want to back up and say, anytime I receive congratulations or thank yous, I'm working on being more comfortable with accepting that. I don't know if it had something to do with my childhood or whatever, but receiving praise and honor, it's just not my thing. But I really appreciate you saying that. It really means so much, especially coming from people who I consider very respectful, people who I consider friends and so forth. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's the truth. I mean, I wasn't the only one. You saw everybody on Facebook. Who has it? Jacque has it. So, you've made a name for yourself.
Okay.
And because obviously you really do, as you said, and I'm with you. I've fallen back in love with the city as well. Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful to see all the things that you're doing. But let's talk more about that civic engagement. What are Trenton 365? What exactly? I know that I've seen you engaged on many levels, but explain to the people what your purpose is when it comes to bringing the community together when it regards to civic engagement.
Sure. So I'm going to give you a bit of a roundabout approach. And again, I always tell folks, I cut my teeth in the professional life in the garment industry, and we operate usually 18 months, 2 years in advance. So the clothing that we're wearing today is something that was designed many moons ago. So there's a lot of focus on forward thinking and how do you come up with these deliverables based upon what you want the marketplaces to be, and oftentimes that's based upon the marketplace that you create. So sometimes people look and see what I do and they say, well, wait a minute, you got all these things going on. You're doing a skate park and you're doing library boxes and you're working out and you're tied in with the civic engagement. You're doing stuff with the election. Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
And the whole idea behind it is that no one is multifaceted. And I like to tell folks this story. When I was a kid, I think I was probably like 14 years old, and I went to see my guidance counselor. That was back in the days where you had like 1 or 2 visits with a guidance counselor. And this guidance counselor didn't even know who I was, couldn't pronounce my name, and gave me a piece of paper with a few job or careers listed on and said, hey, you have to pick one of these. That's what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And as a young boy, I mean, my hormones are raging. There was one thing I was thinking about doing for the rest of my life, and it wasn't anything to do with a career. You know what I'm saying? So I realized that stunted my growth. And I grew up thinking, how many other thousands of people, tens of thousands of people in this area had that happen to them and stunted them. So I said, anything I do from this point on, I'm not going to let anybody dictate or tell me, hey, you're stretching too thin or you're doing too much of this. I'm going to do exactly what I feel passionate and called to do, because when it comes down to it, all glory be to God. Mm-hmm. That's a spirit that's been put in me.
That's it.
So if I'm preventing that spirit from actually going out, engaging, meeting people who may not look like me, may not speak the same language or be from the same background, what am I really doing? Especially if I'm aspiring to live for a higher glory.
Absolutely. Yeah, because he's giving you many gifts. And I'm going to tell you, I love it that, he wants to make sure that we use every gift. And that's what you're doing. And that's what you're supposed to do. So I believe that we can't reach too high. You know what I'm saying? We can. We need to go as far as what God put inside of us. So I think you're doing a great job.
Great.
In regards to civic engagement, now, again, we're going to stick to this.
Sure.
I want to stick to what recently just happened, because all that you were doing, and you were getting the community engaged and getting them to know more about the candidates. Each one, I saw you would be out there, rather if it was the council men and women, you were there. If it for those who running for mayor, you were there as well. So I just saw you, and trying to get the community engaged and giving them information. How important is that? Because I'm going to tell you, we didn't get I think I read one of your posts, we didn't get a high turnaround when it comes to those who went out there and vote.
Yeah, so later we'll get into some of the statistics, which actually lit the fire under me. I'll use this as an example. When people travel and they go places, they say, oh, it was so beautiful. There were so many things to do. It was clean. There was no crime, all those different things. And through my research, that's because those people who live in those communities, they're not going to have it any other way. And I mean, we can drive 8-10 miles north from here and go up to Princeton, and you could take the most hardened person from Trenton and put them in Princeton, and they know how to act because they know what the repercussions are.
Right.
And that's because the residents and the administration and the municipality, they know this is what we are. We don't have much of that here in Trenton that I can see. And I'm not saying that I see everything and I know everything, but we have a lack of civic civics taught, number one, in school. And number two, we have a lack of residents who are civically engaged. And I know there's lots of moving parts with that. There's lots of dynamics. It's because we're a transient city. We have a lot of residents whose whose native language isn't English. So there's sometimes a communication barrier. We also have economic differences from extreme levels of poverty on up. So there's lots of different moving parts. But we've got to get to some sort of semblance where everyone knows what the basics are. If you move into the community, you know when trash day is. And you know you can't put your trash out whenever you feel like putting your trash out. And if you miss trash day, you need to bring your trash back in. And if not, you're going to have to pay the consequences. And there's simple things like that that are physics. My idea of everything is that if we know what the rules are and we're engaged civically, if there's an issue, we can change the rules because the government is run by the people. But here in Trenton, we just don't have a large percentage of people who are doing that. And I'll just shout out a couple numbers really quickly. In this last election, we had approximately 40,000 people registered to vote. We had less than 9,000 people exercise that right and privilege.
But why do you think that is? I've heard different things. You know, I've heard some really extreme things. Well, maybe those people they don't have the right to vote anymore. I'm like, okay, it's 40,000 people, 9,000. That still doesn't make sense.
So I'm going to jump in there, and this is going to be a bit controversial, but it's just hear me out here. So the 40,000 people who are registered to vote, let's just say 10% of them they don't live in the city anymore, they've aged off, they've died, any of those things. All right, so that still puts us at like 35,000 people. We have a large percentage of people who are multi-generationally impoverished, and they're disenfranchised. They've gone through multiple administrations that you haven't seen much change. And there's a lot of people who just say, there's no reason for me to do it anymore. Or I'm not going to be here, so I could care less. Or I've heard I don't have children in school, so I don't care about what happens at the school board. I don't own a business here. I don't care. I rent. I don't care about taxes. All those different things seem to add up. But I think that more importantly, the problem is the fact that we just lack communication. I think that most people just don't even understand what the process is of being civically engaged and that there's a responsibility for being a citizen. If you see something, you're supposed to say something. That's part of being a civilian.
Come to the meetings. And, so do you think that the candidates did a great job getting out in the community, or they could have done better? I
think great job is a bit...
stretch.
Yeah. I think saying a great job is giving them a bit too much credit.
Right.
I know at one point in time there were 30-something candidates who were running. And I don't consider myself to be... I don't know everybody.
Right.
But there were people who were running who I had no idea. I had never even heard of their name before.
Right.
And I'm thinking... someone who's involved in media, someone who's as active civically as I am throughout the city, if you're running for a position, an elected position, and I have never heard of you, there's a really, really good chance that a large percentage of the population here has no idea who you are either.
Absolutely. So do you think that hurt all of the candidates that did run? Because, we had, there were some people who were very close people were very surprised, like probably Darren Freedom.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think with the amount of people running, I'm still torn. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but I'm torn behind the idea of why so many people decided to run after Eric said he wasn't going to run.
Right.
So to me, that means, were you really interested in running, or were you doing, or are you doing it now because Eric's not there? And if that's the case, I don't know if you're somebody who should be leading the capital city of New Jersey.
Absolutely. Yeah, there were quite a bit of names thrown in the hat after the fact. I mean, I think a lot of people were surprised that Eric Jackson did not run again for a second term. And some were very disappointed, actually. Yeah,
I'm sure a lot of people were. I mean, and just being candid, I'm also very fortunate and thankful for my privilege and stuff that I meet people. But there were inklings early on that Eric wasn't going to run for a multitude of reasons. And it turned out to be true.
Yeah. Well, we have to take a break.
Sure.
All right, but we'll be back. For those who are listening, you're listening to WIMG 1300 AM, but you're tuned in to Trenton 365. I'm at Trenton 365 tonight with Mr. Trenton 365, Jacque Howard, and we'll be back after this commercial break. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one.
See the future stars of the majors at the 2018 Eastern League All-Star Classic on July 10th and 11th, presented by Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey at Arm & Hammer Park in Trenton. The Classic kicks off on Tuesday, July 10th, with a special baseball game between the New York and Philadelphia Police Departments, followed by the Cases Pork Roll Home Run Derby. Be there on Wednesday as the East and West Division All-Stars face off. Tickets are on sale now at trentonthunder.com/2018 ASG.
Good evening and welcome back to Trenton 365. You're listening to your girl Lisa Austin Granville, and I'm interviewing Mr. Trenton 365, Mr. Jacque Howard, and I'm really excited about because this is a great show, and we have just talked the first 15 minutes about civic engagement, and I think that's extremely important with the elections that were just passed, and now we still have some runoffs, so we need to talk a little bit about that as well, and what you feel your responsibility is when it comes to letting the city of Trenton and Mercer County know more about being engaged.
Wow, I tell you what, that's a fantastic question, and thank you for asking, because generally people ask me for my opinions and my thoughts, but my responsibility, which is key. Being someone who's in the public eye, however I accept that or not. I am someone who's looked at in the public. But also being a media person. I mean, there's a responsibility that we have. If we're going to be distributing information, it's got to be fair. I work by very specific rules that it's unbiased, it's nonpartisan, that I'm not interjecting my own personal feelings and emotions in. I'm just bringing this information and letting it fall where it may. The responsibility I believe that we have as citizens is to honor that right and privilege we have. I like to tell folks a story about when I was first voting. I met Edith Savage Jennings, and I had no idea who she was. She stopped me at the polling place in Ewing and said, pulled me aside and said, "Hey, young man, the typical motherly thing." And she said, "Do you know what you're doing?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm voting." And, I probably spouted out something about, I'm doing this. I want to exercise my right. One of those kind of things.
One of those power moves,
Yeah. And she humbly, encouraged me and said, bring other people, some of your friends the next time, because what you're doing is very important. And later in life, after, getting trained as a community organizer with a Building One America, Paul Scully and Mike Kruglich, Obama's counterparts, I found out who she was. And the power that she was with Martin Luther King. She was a big civil rights advocate.
Wow.
And here she is, right here in Ewing in Trenton, New Jersey.
Wow.
And I said, there's no way that I cannot do this. So I vote in all the elections.
Absolutely.
I don't tell people who I vote for. I vote across party lines. I vote with issues.
So have I. Absolutely.
But literally, I feel I've got to. I've gone to the polling places when I've been sick, but I go anyway. And I think that's a responsibility that we have. In addition to that, as people of the media, I think that we have a responsibility to dig a little deeper, provide some access to information that some people may not get. As connected as we are with social media and mobile devices and so forth, I think that we lack communication now more than ever. And being a person that identifies as being African American or black, I don't know all the details about my heritage, which is something that happened because of slavery, I'm sure. There's a responsibility that I have to take advantage of what I have here in front of me, because there are so many people who never had this opportunity, one, and there are so many other people who are waiting for this opportunity, but sometimes people like me and like you, we have to open up the door or be the gatekeeper or kick the door in or whatever, so that there's other opportunities.
Yeah, and I think, you had said something in regards to basically what you were saying. There's some almost like some misconceptions as far as, and let's talk about even with the mayoral race, and we're talking about when we're choosing a candidate, because although you can't and we can't, and people don't understand that even with me, I'm one of those people. I don't. One, because, I'm a minister of the gospel, and I don't believe it's fair for me to eject my candidate on anyone. I don't do that. But I do tell people to pray and ask the Lord to lead them. Don't just get in there and just push a lever because they look like you, because they're the same, if you're Republican, no, you really have to, you need to be led, especially right now in this season. We need to be led, because whoever is our mayor, and I share this with you, they get the opportunity to breathe into our community, their thoughts, their lifestyle, their suggestions. So we have to be very mindful. But we had talked about something about the learning curve. Share a little bit about that learning curve, because I don't think that those who are listening, they need to really understand that someone's not going to just get in here and just be able to take off and just...
Sure. So I think most people don't understand, number one, our governmental system. I mean, we're under the Faulkner Act, Trenton, we have a strong mayor. Basically, the mayor enters into contracts. The council is the checks and balances, handling the budget, et cetera. A lot of times people want to talk about the schooling. Well, the mayor appoints the school board. City council has very little to do with that.
But that's in Trenton. But that's not.
It's not all over. That's here in Trenton.
Okay.
But it behooves people to do a little research and find out some of the details about what they're doing. I know I'm going to jump around a little bit, but you had mentioned something about people voting and and I want to say they're being misled because they're voting for people because they may scream the loudest, or they may look the most attractive, or they may belong to a certain demographic that represents with them. But people need to do a little bit more and find out some details about what are the policies and the procedures. It's easy during the during the campaigning season to say, I'm going to fix this, fix all the streets. I'm going to change the school. I'm going to bring in a bunch of businesses. All the lights are going to be on. All these different things. And if you think about it, if it was that easy, then wouldn't we all be doing it?
Absolutely.
So that's one thing to consider. Now, to your point about the learning curve, in July we will be swearing in 5 of the 8 people will be new.
What does that mean to those?
They will have never held a public position before. Now, just think about whatever your job is in the listening and viewing audience. Your first day into your job, do you know everything about that job? Even if you're going from one position at one company or corporation to the other, there's still a lot of you got to learn.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing with this.
SOPs, training.
Exactly. Dealing with people, or what's the weather like, traveling, all those different things make a big difference. And I think that a lot of people aren't thinking about that. So to counteract that as a community organizer, what I'm doing with, I've got to give a shout out to Bridge the Vote, which is I'm working with filmmaker Will Foskey, and we've been interviewing candidates for mayor and council about their platforms and sharing them in an unbiased, nonpartisan way just to get as much information out about them as possible. Well, now we're into the next phase. The first phase of the election is over. We're into the runoffs now. But now we've said that we were always going to continue these conversations on an ongoing basis throughout the city. Because it's nice to do all these things up until the election, but what do you do afterwards? So tomorrow at Westminster Presbyterian Church from 6 to 8 p.m., I've invited about 2 dozen, maybe a little more, probably 3 or 4 dozen people to come, different parts of the community, all Trenton residents, to document what their thoughts and concerns are. We're going to compile that information, and we're going to share it publicly, but we're going to submit it to whomever is elected. And we're going to tell them, hey, look, we're here. We're going to work with you. Right. These are the action steps that we're willing to take. We're willing to make phone calls. We're willing to write letters. We're willing to meet you at these different locations and to provide you support. But that's what civic engagement is. Not that it's a top-down approach like a pyramid where the elected official decides everything and everyone follows. It's supposed to be the other way around.
Absolutely. We are in charge. We should be. But because, and I've been to a couple of the town hall meetings, and sometimes it's empty, and that in itself is it's alarming. It's alarming because, if we don't understand how important this city is. I mean, we already are dealing, right now, we are so engaged with all of this voting, we have even forgotten about all the crime. And that's still going on. No one's talking about it.
Yeah. Again, as a community organizer, part of what I do is I recognize and see different things. And my strategy is a no-blame approach. So I'm always thinking, how can we fix this without beating anyone over the head and without making it so difficult that we can't work together later? I want to work with you now, and if we can't now, then we can work later.
Absolutely.
I come from a big family. I'm one of 7. That's just, you learn how to get
I'm
along.
one of 14.
There you go. So you figure it out.
Exactly.
You understand the pecking
Exactly.
order. And when I think about things here in Trenton, like the crime, there's been people shot. Where's the response?
Where is the response?
And I'm not talking about anything elaborate, but just something.
Right.
We had a major issue with the water, and we don't even know if it's been corrected. I received a confidential phone call from someone trusted who said, we got problems with the water. I reached out to a bunch of people in the administration. No one knew. And then I get an email that says, okay, well, there was an issue with the water, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera.
Is this the one that was on Facebook? You probably got it before,
so
but it was all over Facebook.
So anyway, my point is this.
What in the heck?
We're less than 7.5 square miles. We have
Right.
approximately 80,000 people.
Yeah.
If we can't control or communicate properly now, how are we expecting to progress and get better? Are we all of a sudden, once we reach a threshold of a certain magical number, 95,000, all of a sudden it's going to click? We don't communicate well now. We're not going to communicate better later unless we fix what we have now. And I think that's where I am the most frustrated with where we are now. And again, it's not against this administration, because this didn't happen under Eric Jackson's. It didn't happen under Tony Mack.
That's
and it didn't happen under Doug Palmer. This is a systemic issue by players who are in, around, and throughout this region. And they're going to continue to operate that way until they see there's a reason to change. And to me, that means we need to have more people involved in the process.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you're doing, and we're going to talk about recreation now. And so tell us about, because, again, the acronym R.E.A.H., recreation is for that R. So, that's your way of really trying to change the atmosphere here when it comes to the youth, providing something for them as well.
Sure. Yeah, I like to think that, I know we often divide people based upon different demographics, age, ethnicity, gender, all those different things. To me, I just look at us as all human beings. I took scripture seriously in Revelation when it talks about we're going to be worshiping in heaven with a number of people that can't be counted, of all different backgrounds and all those different things. So I was like, wow, that makes sense to me. I think it's kind of cool. So I might as well get used to it now. So to me, I'm always trying to think about how can I be as inclusive as possible. I'm not sleeping with certain people, so I don't know what your sexual preference is. And basically, that's something between you and God got to work out if that's an issue. That's not on me.
Right.
So I'm always trying to bring people together. And part of that, I find one of the things that is most enjoyable for me is to bring people together and do stuff. Recreation. You and I, we grew up playing sports.
That's it.
So some of my fondest memories are being with people playing sports.
Absolutely.
So I don't understand how we get to a certain point as adults and we stop all those things.
Yeah, well, it stops. It seems to, not for me, because I'm the biggest kid you'll ever meet. But yeah, it definitely seems to stop. And I think that's another reason why there's so much obesity. There's so much, diabetes and high cholesterol, because we are not exercising that right of recreation. Gym was a huge deal when we were younger.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
remember they
sure.
had to you have to take the test and everything.
Yeah.
In gym class.
So absolutely. So recreation is a big part of what I do, and the idea behind recreation is it's not necessarily gym class. It's actually just bringing people together and doing stuff.
That's good. Hey, well, guess what? We have to take a break.
Sure.
For those who are listening, you're listening to Trenton 365. This is your girl, Lisa Austin Granville, and we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Oh, come along. Come along. Oh, friends, come along. Get aboard. Oh, ride this train. Yeah. Bring it on. Over here. gospel train is coming around the bend. The Lord God said that he's coming back. But one thing he didn't say when. Y'all know what? Get your houses in order. You see the Lord is coming again. But one thing I know, nothing on. Oh, you ain't got nothing to lose. Everything right there. Oh, come along. Come on. My friends, come along. Get aboard. Oh, yeah. Ride this train. Yeah, ain't nothing over here on this train. You got everything. Y'all wait just one more time.
Welcome back. This is Lisa Austin Granville, and you're listening to Trenton 365 right here on WIMG 1300 AM Great Gospel right here in Trenton, New Jersey. That's right. And we're here in the studio with Mr. Trenton 365 himself, and that's Jacque Howard. And we've been having a great conversation.
Yes, thank you.
We've talked about civic engagement. We're talking about now recreation, and we're going to continue to talk about recreation because you're doing some great things.
Thank you.
You know, in the city of Trenton. So tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So as a child, one of the first things that I learned my freedom on was a bicycle. And to this day, I still ride. I mean, I'm not like a professional rider. I don't do touring stuff. It's really just whipping around. But there's this freedom that comes with biking. And we've got an amazing bicycling and bike culture here in Trenton. We have fabricators that are making tall bikes and custom modifications.
Wow.
Big shout out to my man Wills Kinsley and the Trenton Bike Modification Association. We have people who play bike polo, like the horse polo.
Really?
But they're playing bike polo.
Where's that at? I want to do that.
Yeah, that's happening in the North Ward. And folks, you can go to the website, Trenton365.com, or on Facebook's Trenton 365 Show, and you can find some of this information and some archives of my interviews. But yeah, so we've got this amazing bike culture, and then we've got this advocacy organization called Trenton Cycling Revolution that I'm a part of. And this organization's got this is our 22nd year. And we do a bike tour of Trenton. It's usually it's a family-friendly, about 15-mile ride throughout the city, and we hit all the different wards, and we have a different theme. In our 20th year, we had trees. So we were driving around, letting people recognize some of the things happening with nature. Last year, the 21st year, we did a bike tour where we went to houses of worship, and we visited approximately, I think it was 24 different houses of worship. And a lot of people don't realize like Trenton has well over 100 churches.
Mm-hmm. If not more.
Yeah. And maybe later, if we have some time, we'll get into talking about some involvement with the churches.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. I definitely want to bring that in. We definitely have to talk about that.
Sure thing. But yeah, so recreation and biking is one of those things. And I grew up riding BMX and, doing dirt tracks and all that stuff.
Dirt, oh my goodness, yes.
So right after that
Great
wave
days.
came skateboarding. And I wasn't a skateboarder, but I have like some of the younger people in my neighborhood, they were skateboarders. And shout out to Mark Leckington, who works here in the city, and him and I are really good friends. And I approached him a few years ago and said, hey, man, what about creating a skate park here in Trenton? You think we could do it? And he goes, it would definitely work out. So we started doing some research. We have a little group, it's called the Capital City Rollers, which is a Facebook group where anyone who skateboards, ride bikes, or does anything that has wheels and is human powered, so that's rollerblading, roller skates, skateboarding,
Awesome.
BMX, biking. And we've been having some meetings, and we found a location here in the city, and it's a brownfield site, so we're working on having a skate park built here in the city of Trenton. And for those of you who are interested, you can go to Capital City Rollers on Facebook, or you can just look up the video that was recently done by the College of New Jersey. They're working on a documentary about skating in Trenton, and they put together something, and I'm interviewed in that, and it's called Trenton Makes the World Skates. So Trenton Makes the World Skates, and there you can find a little bit more about the skating culture. You can catch a cameo from me in there talking a bit about things, and that's one of the things that I'm passionate about.
That is so awesome. I'm really excited about that because again, love what you said, the vision that God has given you, because it is God. In heaven, we're all going to be rejoicing together. There's not going to be separate of age and race and all the different things that we find to be a boundary here. There's no boundaries in heaven. So this is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So and then it can bring out the kid and someone like me, because I totally enjoy skating and biking and all of those things. But that bike polo has me peaked. That my interest peaked.
Yeah. I don't play. I don't play, but I've watched it. It's very talented. It takes a lot of coordination.
I'm sure.
But we have some amazing local people who play, men and women. Different age groups, and they actually even host some events where people come from different parts of the country to Trenton to play bike polo.
I don't think we know how fortunate we are to be in this city. This city is so great. It's really a light on a hill, and we have not tapped into all of the great resources. I'm so excited to know what these kids, the ones that are truly paying attention, the ones that someone has their hands on. They're going to go great. They're going to go far places.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to see that, all of this, the recreation, you have civic engagement. What's E? Environment.
Environment, sure. I want to talk about the environment.
Yeah,
if we want, we can run through them. So the environment,
yeah, absolutely.
Because we're located on a body of water, the Delaware River,
Mm-hmm.
We are part of that river city. And when you look at the history of the country, that's why cities were built. I mean, it was a mode of transportation.
Mm-hmm.
It was also an opportunity for energy, as an energy source as well. And for all the things that people say about this region, the negatives, we live in a very, very fortunate area right on the Delaware River. There's no toxic waste that's happening there. Even with the sour lands just north of here, you've got organizations that are preventing building and developments because they want to keep it green. All of that does make a difference because as the water trickles down from up north and comes down into the outlet of the Atlantic Ocean, the cleaner the water is when it gets to Trenton, the cleaner the water will be when it goes downstream.
Absolutely.
And that's important for us to consider that. And again, back to our drinking water here, for a long time, Trenton had very, very good quality of water. I'm not going to say it was like New York, but it was good. and now I think unfortunately it's become an economic revenue generator, which I think has twisted the mentality of why we should respect it more. And I'm looking to work with any organizations that want to make sure that the body of water that is here in Trenton on the Delaware River, that it's pristine, that it's clean, and that everyone who uses, not just Trentonians use the water. I mean, there's other municipalities, Lawrence, Hopewell, Pennington, Hamilton, Ewing, Lawrence, that they all get good quality water. And there's no reason why it can't be done. During this election cycle, we've heard lots of people talk about there's not enough staff there's not enough money, and I want to say this: if our budget continues to increase, but our services continue to decrease, that's pretty simple where the problem is.
Absolutely, and we need to look at that, but they're not. Unfortunately, not on the level that they should be.
Well, I'm going to jump in because I don't want to say that they're not. I think that
not at the level. Maybe that they're not, but we all can look at things a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that is
a little bit more crucially. Because
I've got to jump in and say this. I don't think that it's people aren't looking. I think that because there's a lack of civic engagement, if employee A comes in and their supervisor is on their back, just do what I tell you to do, eventually you're just going to do what they tell you to do, or you're going to leave.
Right.
And I think that part of it is that we don't have enough people who understand the process and know what to do about the process.
But see, then that comes to training, and then that comes to, yes, I believe that as civically, we all have a duty. But I work in, my day job, I am in pharmaceuticals, so I run clinical trials. So therefore, I still have an obligation to make sure that when I'm looking at the SOPs and I'm looking at the protocol, that protocol is meeting the expectations of those subjects, those patients that are at the doctor's offices. And then the data comes in. I also have a job to now work with biostatisticians and to make sure that the data that's coming in meets the efficacy rate it's supposed to. So I think that, we all have a job. They're paying me to do my job. And although, but there's also people sometimes protesting, you see too, when it comes to, like phase 1 study using animals and all different things. So they feel like they have a right. I think that we all need to look at it a little bit more crucially. I was on a study years ago, and colorectal study, and people were dying like this. I took myself off, because I personally didn't feel like this is something I could have my name on and be proud about. So we need to look at those that are actually working in that field, and also put some onus on the civic engagement as well. But it has to be that.
Sure, yeah, and I agree with you on that. And that's so one of the initiatives that I'm doing is to coordinate a tour of our infrastructure here in Trenton, including the waterworks. Awesome. And already there's been a few people who said, hey, you really can't do that. You shouldn't do that. Well, why not? If it's something that everyone is entitled to, it's a right. I mean, who knows? Could it really be worse than what we know? Well, it's important for us to know that if we're going to move forward. So that's one of the things that's coming down the pike as well.
And I think, and again, I think that's excellent, because I think that's what was the lead issue. When we started getting involved and started, getting the paper involved, and, parents. So we can play a huge role. And it's very significant. So I think that, having that tour would be amazing. Because, we need to start letting people know. We don't want this to be another, what was that city?
Flint.
Flint, yeah. Yes. We don't want that. We want to make sure that we have clean water. We want our families to be healthy.
Well, I'll tell you this. You're starting to see that different pockets of the country are starting to change. When people start rising up and start being civically engaged, and they can pinpoint who that person was who said, just do it anyway, and they start having lawsuits filed, names brought out in public, things start to change. I know that Trenton's been very fortunate. We haven't had any of those major, police brutality shootings and those kinds of things. But I don't know if we're prepared for that. So it's important for us, I think, to get ourselves aligned, get ourselves situated right now. Hey, let's make Trenton, and I said this with the Trenton 250 master plan, let's make Trenton be that prototypical post-industrial city going forward 20 years from now. Let's shoot that high. Let's make it a priority. Let's not just fix our roads for what they are today. Let's improve everything for the next generation.
I love that whole, I hope that someone's listening to you. I want you to tell those who are listening where they can get more information about you. Sure.
So I'm pretty available. I do answer my own personal emails. Trenton, like the city, the numbers 365 and the word show. Trenton365show @gmail.com. You can also follow me on Facebook, Trenton365 Show. On Twitter, it's Trenton365. And the website is Trenton365.com.
Well, we're about to take another break. Sure. Is there anything that you want to say before we go on break?
The main thing, folks, is be civically involved and reach out to me if you've got something cool that's happening, you've got an issue you'd like to discuss. I believe that the only way that we're going to build a better community is we start having conversations across the table from each other where my point of view and your point of view are equally as important. And if we can do that, that's going to be the first step.
I think you couldn't have a better man at the table.
Thanks.
No, it's real talk, real talk. Hey, well, we'll be back. You're listening to Trenton 365. This is your girl, Lisa Austin Granville, and you're tuning in to WIMG 1300 AM, the baddest radio station on the land. That's gospel, 3-time Stellar Award-winning show, that is. And we'll be back after this commercial break. Thank you.
When you were a little kid and you thought about what you wanted to be, teaching was at the top of your list. But things changed. And as you got older, teaching didn't seem like the best option anymore. So you're thinking you'll be something else. But what would your 12-year-old self say? Now you want to be a doctor. You don't think teachers save lives? 25 at a time. An actress? Try playing a different role every time the bell rings. How about a scientist? Ever heard of physics, chemistry? Who do you think teaches that? Teachers today are breaking down obstacles, finding innovative ways to instill old lessons, and taking learning far beyond the four walls of the classroom. It's time to recognize that great things are happening in teaching and put it back on your list. Don't try to convince yourself otherwise. You had it right the first time.
Find out how you can make more at teach.org. Make more. Teach. Brought to you by Teach and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. You're listening to Trenton 365. This is your girl, Lisa Austin Granville. And we have Mr. Trenton 365 right here in the studio. No other than Mr. Jacque Howard.
Yay,
welcome back.
What up?
Welcome back. We've been having a great talk. We have been talking about Trenton 365 and all the things that you do in the community to bring it together. Now, R.E.A.C.H. Tell us what it is.
Sure,
That's
R.E.A.C.H.
the acronym.
R.E.A.C.H. R-E-A.C.H. Recreation, Environment, Art and Culture, Civic Engagement, Health, and Nutrition.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about health and nutrition.
Sure. To jump right in with that, I mean, I was fortunate enough that my mother at a very young age taught me how to cook. I was one of those latchkey kids. I was coming home. I was able to make meals and stuff like that. But she, at one point in time, there was no red meat. There was no pork. It was just chicken and fish. And, I'd love and honor and respect my mom so much. I was like, all right, well, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
And I ended up, I remember having conversations with her like, chicken again? But she's like, you're going to eat it, right?
Right.
But yeah, so I learned the importance of that. And I was always somebody, I when I was a kid, candy was there. We had a drawer full of candy. So I don't want it. Like, I was never that person, and even today, I'm not really a big sweets person. But I learned a very balanced diet at a young age, eating legumes, beans, lots of vegetables, limiting how much fried food and so forth. And now that I'm almost 50, I had made a promise to myself that I would be in the best shape of my life by I have my 50th birthday, and that'll be later this year. But I've been just monitoring what I eat. I used to, because of my schedule, I would eat, big meals late at night. I cut back on all that. Now I snack with just nuts. I try to avoid, so much of the bad stuff, the fried food, etc. And I'm doing pretty good. And I think that health is something that although it's on the forefront, because nobody likes to feel bad.
Right.
But I think that a lot of times, especially in post-industrial cities like Trenton, there's a large percentage of the population that just doesn't have access to good quality foods exercise opportunities, the stress of living in a city. And I'm learning a lot about that, and also the mental health aspect of it, especially being a person of color, that whole men don't cry kind of thing.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
all those things. And I'm trying to unwind
absolutely
all of that I was taught, whether it was specifically taught to me or it was just environmentally that I learned it, but to unwind those things. It's actually been amazing.
You got to throw it out. And
yes.
I was just sharing with a friend of mine, and and I said, every time I look at you, I feel, I can see that you're crying on the inside. Because guess what? Men have been told not to cry. They've been told not to show emotions. And I don't know why. And just like, women, yes, we are princesses, but we have to get out of some type of mentality that we have been pushed in to receive. Like, okay, for instance, women are emotional. Why are we emotional? Because you told us we're emotional?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So we have to get out of those things. And men, we have to, even as women, when I share with women, you have to allow a man to be a man. And that doesn't mean that he has to carry everything on his shoulder. Who can carry everything on his shoulder? That's what we have God for.
Yes.
And so, I'm really happy. I think people need to deal with that more. And I think men will feel so much less pressure. Sure. Because it has to be pressure. I mean,
sure.
When you told that you have a cape and you have to save everything.
Yeah.
You know?
And I want to give a shout out to Kimmy Carlos, Urban Mental Health Alliance, who's a good friend. She's doing some amazing things with mental health advocacy here in Trenton. And, I want to back up, because a lot of people see all the things that I'm doing. I'm a connector. And I love partnering with people. Yeah. Like, there are some things projects that soup to nuts, that's me.
Right.
But most of the things that I do, I'm looking for people to partner with.
Absolutely.
I'm looking for organizations, small businesses, nonprofits, etc., who want to do this, who maybe need some media exposure, who maybe need an additional person who can provide some different insight or an artistic expression on a project that they're working on. So I don't want anybody to think that, hey, this is just me running around doing all these things. Yeah, this is my baby, this is my business. But at the same token, I can't do any of these things without anyone else. It's like the body. What's the sense of having a hand if you don't have an arm?
Yes, right. That's it. We need each other. And,
Yes.
one of my mottos is stronger together.
Yes.
And that's it. And if people would catch that vision, we would get farther. That's what you've been talking about all with civic engagement.
Mm-hmm.
We're stronger together.
Exactly.
And I'm going to go back to that because I believe, is this our last 15 minutes?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. It went by quick, right?
Yeah, it always does when you're having a good time with
Oh
some
my
good
God.
people.
But I want to go back to this because,
Mm-hmm.
we have some upcoming elections. And I want to talk about the church involvement.
So probably, I guess it was maybe 2010, maybe 2011 or so. I was leaving worship at Westminster, and I was driving on Greenwood Avenue, which is Route 33, which is a state road. And from the grounds for Sculpture's Way, to the old Greenwood Circle, which is where the Trenton Transit Village is. Mm-hmm. If you go 2 blocks in either direction off of Greenwood Avenue, there are 12 churches. And I remember hearing Martin Luther King say Sunday is the most segregated day of the week.
Wow, yeah.
So I said, let me just ride around and take a look at these different churches. And I came up with this idea, and it was GAFCO, GAFCO. And it was Greenwood Avenue's Faith Centers Organized, because they're not all churches. I mean, there's like, different denominations and different sects of religion, etc. And I tried to organize all the churches. And I was blown away by the lack of response from physically going to these churches, handing someone a letter saying, this is who I am, check my references, this is what I'm looking to do. And at that point, I started to realize that the faith community, not only is it a backbone, but it's a big portion of the community, but it can be just as deceptive and detrimental to any community.
And why is that?
Mainly because I think that most faith centers aren't civically engaged. They're churches, they're facilities, they're beautiful, they're big, they're fenced in.
But how can that be when Jesus' whole mission was to bring people together, to get out and evangelize?
Well, I think if anyone who studies the Christianity and studies Christ, I think that people would be really shocked at the person he was and what he.
Well, these people, I believe they feel as though they've studied.
I think that they've studied in theory,
right?
Because when we think about even the commandment of loving your neighbor as yourself, if churches just took care of their block. The 100+ churches that are in Trenton, the city would change overnight. But churches have gotten to the point where, and I'm going to say this, even in my house. I mean, we all put on a persona, but there's different stuff that's going on, and it's the same thing with churches. Yeah. I mean, a lot of churches are having issues with finances and
low membership.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah. But that pastor or that leadership won't make that public. They're just chasing the money to keep the lights on, just like other nonprofits, which is why most churches have a community development corporation or a nonprofit entity to chase that money. And that's fine. I understand that if you want to keep the lights on and pay salaries, I get that. But maybe not every neighborhood church needs to have a food pantry.
Right.
Maybe one needs to have a daycare. Yeah. Maybe one needs to have a senior center.
That goes back to the body. And, and I thought about that, like, because I was a little set back when it came to the elections previously, and how I didn't see a lot of the churches engage, and how, I don't know what they're telling their congregations on Sunday, but I would hope that they're telling them to vote, to get involved, to know who these candidates are. And I didn't really get that. So I felt a little taken back because of that. But then, the Lord dealt with me, and He said, everyone has different responsibilities. Now, there's some people who had the responsibility, they just dropped the ball. Mm-hmm. But everyone is, just like you said earlier, we're a body. Mm-hmm. And,
Yeah, as far as the churches go, I mean, I worship at a church where we don't endorse any candidates, but we do encourage people to be a part of the process of voting. I just think it's a lot easier for churches to not even discuss it, number one, or number two, for everyone to lean on whatever the pastor or senior leadership does. And I'm going to give you an example. I was having a conversation with some candidates, and they asked me why I don't publicly endorse anyone. And I said, well, first of all, I want to stay unbiased, number one, and number two, I don't want to sway anyone else's opinions. I want them to do their homework. I'll provide them as much information as I can, but I want them to make the decision on their own. And one of the persons there said, well, you can help influence who gets elected. And I said, that's exactly what I don't want to do. I don't want to influence someone to vote in any particular matter. I want them to have the information. I want the Spirit to lead them. I want them to want something to resonate with them so that they can say, well, wait a minute, I never knew that before. So let me look a little bit further, because that's how we grow and that's how we learn. And I can tell you that is the mindset of where we are in Trenton. And if we're like that here in Trenton, I'm sure there's municipalities throughout the nation that are equally doing the same thing.
How can we get the churches back? I mean, how can we get them involved in civic engagement?
Well, I think the main thing is holding them accountable.
Absolutely.
I understand the state and federal laws as far as nonprofits go, but when you have a community like Trenton that has well over 60% of the land is nonprofit, whether that's a nonprofit organization, state, county, or city-owned, no one's paying taxes. But everyone's using water, everyone's using the roads, everyone's using the police and fire. I think that there, and this is happening throughout the country in different pockets. I think that having paying back something, a little bit, percentage, something would be the first step. I also think that it's important for everyone who is a public person, for them to recognize that in this day and age, you're a celebrity, and you should be acting like you're on camera and being recorded at all times. And I think if more people thought about that, I think that you'd see more people taking what they do as a profession seriously.
Yeah, we definitely have to hold the churches responsible and accountable for, because at the end of the day, if we shouldn't, I mean, how can we complain if we're not engaged? And too many people, they complain, but they're not engaged. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, getting the church somehow, and I think that's a part of my assignment that God is dealing with me about, to try to get the churches involved. So, but I do thank you for all that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
We've had a great time here tonight, and we have just like 2 more minutes left. Mm-hmm. So I want you to just to say again where we can reach out to you.
Sure. Yeah. So the first thing to keep in mind, folks, is maybe it's because I grew up under a father who was a military guy. So I think sometimes people are apprehensive to come talk to me, and they may think that my assertiveness comes across as bossiness. But I can tell you, I've got the softest heart.
Yes, he does.
I've got the softest heart, and literally, I want everyone to enjoy life and to be the best that they can be, and I want to partner with everybody. And I'm always available. My email is trenton365show@gmail.com. The website is trenton365.com. Facebook is Trenton365 Show. I have a community calendar page. You can post your events for free. I make art. I'm part of the Trenton Photo Club. I've got a background in fashion. I love working out and exercise and eating really good food. And I'm open and ready to do whatever anyone needs. Just reach out to me.
Now, you guys heard it. This is Mr. Jacque Howard, Mr. Trenton 365 himself. And you've been listening to the #1 gospel radio station in Trenton, New Jersey.
Hey.
And you're also listening to Trenton 365. And I just want to thank you for this evening. It's been awesome for those who have been listening. And I hope you tune in to Mr. Jacque Howard.
Yep.
Mr. Trenton 365.
That's spoken. I think you may see Lisa Granville on here a little bit more, too.
Well, I hope so. Thank you so much for having me this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we'll be back.
All right.